What is up, everyone? Boji here, back at it in Raid Shadow Legends, and we have a 10-time summon event coming up, so let's jump right into it. Alright guys, so before we go ahead and jump into the champions involved in that 10-time summon event, I did want to mention that we do have that drop fever still going for the resist set. That is going to be ending later today, so definitely make sure you are farming that out if you're looking for resist pieces. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is we do have that fragment summon for Versolf the Grim tomorrow, and yeah, so definitely make sure you're checking in on the events and the schedule. That should go out tomorrow morning once the event goes live. And yeah, so along with that fragment summon should be something like a champion chase or a summons rush. So yeah, definitely make sure you're checking it out because this 10 times actually has some really good champions in it. I'm not going to waste any time, so there will be content chapters down below if you want to go ahead and jump to a specific champion. Like all reviews, I will go over their kit, give you my opinion on them, and then at the very end of the video I'll do a conclusion on if I think you should be summoning during this time. So let's go ahead and go right into it. All these champions will have to deal with shielding, or having the capability of adding a shield to your allies. So the very first one we're going to go ahead and look at is going to be Minaya from the Bannerlords, a legendary champion. Goes along with Coronar from the Skinwalker Void section. But yeah, so she is going to be a support champion for Bannerlord. So on the A1 we have Graceful Guide, attack one enemy, places a 15% continuous heal buff on the ally with the lowest HP for 2 turns. Booking only is for damage, so nothing benefiting right there, but the continuous heal constantly from the A1 is a nice little touch for the A1. On the A2 we have Mending Ways, attack one enemy, heals this champion and the ally with the lowest HP by 10,000 HP, and then has a 75 or 100% chance if you book it of placing a heal reduction debuff on all enemies for 2 turns, and you can drop this down to a 3-turn cooldown. This could be pretty key in terms of like PvP, where you can put that heal reduction down so no one can get heals from like a passive Siffy or something like that. But yeah, overall not a bad ability. I do like the fact that it heals this champion and also a different ally for that 10,000, so depending on the other champion, 10,000 could be a lot of HP, so yeah, pretty cool ability there. On the A3 we have Beauty's Allure, heals all allies by 40% of their max HP, and then places a block debuffs buff for 2 turns on champions under increased defense buffs. And then if a champion is fully healed by the skill, also places a shield buff on them for 2 turns equal to 25% of the champion's HP. So that's where the shielding portion comes in for this champion. I like this champion just because she seems pretty much like a pure healer, right? She has the continuous heal on the A1, she has a semi double heal on the A2, and then she has an all ally heal on the A3. Getting that block debuffs possibly if you have increased defense going up on your team, so that's always a great plus. Block debuffs is pretty major, especially in PvP. And then on the passive we have Lover's Sacrifice, fill the turn meter of all allies by 20% when this champion is killed, and then revives this champion with 75% HP when killed if Coronar is on the same team. And this actually will trigger even if Coronar is already dead. It still does recognize you have Coronar on your team, so she does res. Yeah, and it's on a 4-turn cooldown, so honestly if you build her tanky enough, she can be extremely annoying in PvP just by continuously resing herself as long as you have Coronar. So overall, really good champion. And then lastly, the aura is a 19% in all battles for speed, which is great. And, you know, it's not the highest speed aura, but in all battles it's just a nice little touch if you want to put her in PvE content as well. But yeah, overall a pretty cool champion in my opinion. Definitely goes well with Coronar, like best with Coronar in my opinion. Solo wise she's okay, but she definitely, you can see the difference when she's running with Coronar. Alright, the next champion we're going to look at is going to be in Sacred Order, and it's going to be a fusion material piece, which is Lodric Falconheart. Wow, can't say that. So yeah, this one I am kind of disappointed in the fact that is in the 10 times, and that's just because if you were part of doing this fusion, he was one that you did 4 of him to create the fusion, so I'd imagine a lot of people do have him, if anything. But yeah, we'll go through his kit real quick. So he is an HP based champion for the Sacred Order. So on the A1 we have Strike of Dismay. Attack one enemy has a 40 or a 60% chance of placing a big decrease attack for 2 turns. That's always a nice thing to have on the A1, and it's a decent chance for the most part, so kudos on the A1. On the A2 we have Hold Out, removes all debuffs from one ally, then places a ally protection buff on that ally for 2 turns, the big version of it. So this is nice. It's like a targeted cleanse, and then you also will protect that ally. Really good for squishy targets and stuff like that. And you can drop that down to a 3-turn cooldown. And then we have an A3, Falcon's Wing, places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns equal to 20% of this champion's max HP, and you can drop this down to a 2-turn cooldown, so pretty much consistently keeping up a shield. Now the shield isn't as big as you would think, right? 20% of this champion's max HP. You can get his health to a decent amount, but the shield does typically break. But overall, if you're like using it for something like the Scarab boss, really good consistent shield that you can keep up. I know back when turn meter was a thing, like turn meter controlling the Scarab boss was really good. You could do this because people were using things like Metal Shaper. This is pretty much a better Metal Shaper, in my opinion. But yeah, overall, not a bad ability, especially for like stuff like faction crypts. And then you have the aura, increase ally HP in Doom Tower battles by 25%. Not a bad aura, definitely better ones, and it is limited to Doom Tower, so that's unfortunate. But overall, not a bad champion, but definitely one I think a lot of people will have. So that is a risk of the 10 times if you're going to be popping Ancient Shards or Sacreds. Next one is going to be a champion a lot of people love, and that is Sir Nick. So Sir Nick, a crazy Void champion, definitely worth going for if you are able to. Unfortunately, we just got done with a bunch of Void events, so I'm not sure how many people actually have Voids to pop for this, which is unfortunately. They seem to be doing this a lot, putting some really good champions after a lot of people burn certain shards. But yeah, so if you don't know, he is an HP champion. We'll go through his kit, which is pretty basic but pretty ridiculous at the same time. So we have Boreal Blade on the A1. Attack one enemy has a 50% chance of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. This debuff cannot be resisted, meaning you need no accuracy, which is awesome. And honestly, procs I feel like more than 50%, but that might just be me. On the A2, we have Polar Protection. Attack all enemies, placing a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns. The value of the shield is equal to 30% of the damage inflicted, and you can drop this down to a 3-turn cooldown with books increasing the damage. Yeah, the shields are huge. Does a lot of damage, especially with like a decreased defense up on the enemy. Just a really good shield for like stuff like Spider, even dealing with the high dungeon waves. The shield can do very well. I personally use him in Ice Golem to protect me from the slams and stuff like that, because you are pretty much dealing with 2 guards plus the Ice Golem, so you're getting a decent amount of shield when you're using this ability. On the A3, we have Goodwill, places Unkillable buff and a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown if you book it. Once again, great for Ice Golem, just in case the slam does deal a little bit more damage than you are expecting and whatnot. So you have that Unkillable, you have the recovery from the continuous heal. Just a really good overall ability right there. And then on the aura, we have increased ally HP in all battles by 33%, which is just great. HP is just one of those standard stats that are good in all situations, and this is for all battles, so just really good overall. But yeah, very sought after Void champion, does very well pretty much in everything. I use him in a lot of things. I use him in Dragon, Ice Golem, my Doom Tower waves every once in a while. So yeah, overall, really great champion. Definitely worth going if you have the Voids. I wouldn't say he's like a game-changing champion, just because of the utility he brings is more damage-based type stuff, not anything like a Warlord where he has the PvP capability and stuff like that. But he could change your PvE aspect. So overall, really cool champion. Next champion we're going to look at is going to be In the barbarian, so we have two legendary barbarians that we're going to be looking at. The first one's going to be Altan, one that I've actually been looking for the longest time. I just haven't been able to get him. At first I did not really like this champion, but after reading his kit and seeing him in action with other people, I actually really want him. So he is going to be a defensive based champion. On the A1, we have Searing Blow. Attack one enemy has a 60% or 75% chance, if booked, of placing a big decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. So really good right off the bat. Another decrease attack on the A1 is always great, consistent. On the A2, we have Wall of Flame. Attacks one enemy, places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns, and then places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns equal to 20% of their max HP if this attack kills an enemy. So there is the shield portion for this champion. I like the whole decrease attack on the A1, increase defense on the A2, just because that makes everything automatically more tanky. Right off the bat, and you can drop this down to a 3-turn cooldown, and honestly I've seen him hit really hard as well, so that is a big plus. And then on the passive, we have Fiery Rebirth. Revives a random ally with 30% HP every time this champion kills an enemy. Resets the cooldown on this champion's skills if this champion kills an enemy and all allies are alive. So if you have a ally down and you kill someone, you revive them. If you have everyone up and you kill something, then you reset your A2, which is awesome. And there's no cooldown on this passive, by the way, so always a nice thing. And then the aura, increase ally defense in all battles by 33%, which if you want to put him in the lead, he increases his damage passively this way. But yeah, honestly, really cool champion. Very simple champion actually, but does a lot of things in terms of actual like resources. So decrease attack, like I said, increase defense, a shield possibly, and possible revives. Just really cool. Next on that list is going to be Valkyrie. So Valkyrie, very well known, but we'll go through her kit anyway. Defensive champion for barbarians as well. So denigration on the A1, attack one enemy 2 times, decrease turn meter by 10% on each hit if the target has any buffs. So a little bit of turn meter control based on attack and defense. Very rare to see that type of thing, but mainly you're going to build her with defense. On the A2, we have Stand Firm. Attack all enemies, places a shield buff on all allies for 3 turns and a counterattack buff on all allies for 2 turns. The value of the shield and the damage inflicted are proportional to this champion's defense. So like I said, you're going to be stacking more defense than attack, even though the A1 has an attack modifier. This is going to go down to a 3-turn cooldown if you book it, increasing the shield and damage when you are booking it as well. But one of the few counterattack champions in the game, the shields can be absolutely huge, which makes her really good for counterattacking on things like Fire Knight if you're still using the counterattack method. Does very well on Clan Boss because her shields are so big. You're getting those extra hits when the Clan Boss does AoE from the counterattacks. Yeah, she has been in a lot of record-breaking Clan Boss teams, so definitely recommend using her in that space if you do grab her. I've also seen her great in PvP. She can be extremely annoying in PvP in my opinion, so yeah, she's well there. So overall, well-rounded champion. And then we have the passive Jealousy. This champion's turn meter will be increased by 10% each time an enemy champion places a buff. Enemy champions will have their turn meters decreased by 10% for each buff they receive. So if you do want her decreasing turn meter like on the A1 and on the passive, you will have to build her with accuracy. But this passive allows her to kind of cut in during PvP, which is also another reason she does so well in PvP. So yeah, overall great there. And then ally aura, or yeah, ally defense and faction crypts by 33% for the aura. Unfortunately, as a legendary, she got a faction crypt aura, which is unfortunate, but if you are going to use her in faction crypts, then yeah, recommend putting her in the lead. But she honestly could probably carry faction crypts by herself for the most part. So really great champion, definitely worth going for if you have the resources for it, and if you're looking for, like, I guess this type of champion for Clan Boss for PvP overall. Alright, the next one is going to be a Lizardman, and actually a newer champion, Skathix. So I believe Skathix was one of the ones that you could have got an extra copy of during this last fusion, so it's a little bit odd that they're already offering a 10 times for him, but pretty good Void champion. So he is going to be a support Lizardman. So and he's going to be on the epic side, so you can use him for the Lizardman Secret Room on Hard Doom Tower. But yeah, let's go through the kit. So on the A1 we have Leg Rack. Attack one enemy, has a 30 or 50% chance if you book it of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Definitely not a bad debuff to have on the A1. Decreased speed is always a nice thing, even if it's on one enemy. On the A2 we have Transfer Rush. Attack all enemies, has a 75 or 100% chance if you book it of stealing one random buff from each enemy on a 3-turn cooldown. Not the greatest ability in my opinion. I don't like the whole stealing random buffs type of abilities, just because first of all it's random, and second of all this automatically seems somewhat bad in PvE, just because there's not a lot of buffs going on in PvE unless you're using him in Doom Tower, where you do actually see buffs get placed. So overall not the greatest ability, but could be decent. On the A3 we have Scales of the Ages. Removes all debuffs from all allies, then places a block debuffs buff and a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns. The shield buff is equal to 20% of this champion's max HP on a 4-turn cooldown. So block debuffs, always a major buff in my opinion, and then having a shield based off of his max HP is really cool, just because you can kind of control that. You can build him as a really big support rather than anything like attack based and stuff like that. Even though he is damage based on attack, you want to build him probably with a high HP to get that shield as big as possible. And then we have the passive of Last Gasp. Places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn whenever their HP drops below 30%. And this is going to have a 6-turn cooldown, so it does stop him from like immediately dying, so he can get the cleanse shield off if you need it. You can steal a shield from the opponent if you need it, possibly with the A2. So overall not a bad passive. It is pretty low, and I wish he did have like a direct type of heal, I guess, more or less. But you know, at least you provide a shield if you're about to die. And then the aura, increase ally resist in all battles by 40. Not the greatest aura, but definitely not bad, especially when it comes to like things like PvP. All the resist can always help, so definitely not a bad one to go for, especially if you missed out on getting your extra copy. Next is going to be a dwarf, not a sacred order, a dwarf by the name of Melga. Where are you, Melga? There you are. So Melga is a pretty dang cool support champion for the Dwarven faction. Definitely can help in faction wars, so let's go ahead and go through the kit. So it is going to be a HP based champion. So on the A1 we have Inspiring Violence. Attack one enemy, has a 50 or a 60-75% chance of removing one random debuff from a random ally. Cannot remove a debuff from this champion, so definitely not the best A1, but I guess if you're being single targeted or something like that, you know, removing a debuff is never a bad thing, but it's definitely not a major A1. So it's a little bit of a plus to just attacking an enemy, right? On the A2 we have Sheer Grit. Places a shield buff on all allies equal to 20% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns, and then also places a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. This ability is ridiculous just because it's based off of this champion's max HP, which means you can make the shield pretty dang big, along with some recovery with the continuous heal is always great. So this is why I say it's great for faction crypts, just because protection along with healing with this champion is pretty major, especially for stage 21, where shields are pretty important, I would say, for survivability. And then on the A3, what every faction crypts needs is a revive. So Glorious Return revives 2 random allies with 20% HP, 20% turn meter, also placing a shield buff on the revived allies for 2 turns equal to 30% of their max HP. So the res is going to be going to give a shield based off of the allies raised max HP, not hers, but you can then use the A2 to get that huge shield on them. So yeah, definitely really cool. And this can go actually down to a 5-turn cooldown, which is pretty low for the most part when we're reviving 2 allies, so I really like that. And honestly, I think she's the only other reviver beyond what's her name? Can't remember her name. Molly. So yeah, definitely worth going for if you are in need of help during the faction crypts for dwarves. And then has the aura increasing ally HP in all battles by 15%. 15% is low, but she is an epic champion and it is in for all battles, so definitely worth putting in this main slot if you want that little bit of extra shield, because it is going to be based off max HP. So yeah, that is the dwarf. And then the last champion is going to be from the Shadowkin faction, and is going to be Burangiri. So Burangiri, one really cool looking champion in my opinion. Actually, they've knocked it out of the park for Shadowkin in general, but it's going to be a defensive based champion for the Shadowkin. So on the A1 we have Battering Skull, attack one enemy, has a 20 or a 40% chance of placing a provoke debuff for one turn. So not the highest chance, but I guess it is something on the A1. I'd like to see like a drop deep or a drop attack or something like that, but you can't have it on all A1s, right? On the A2 we have Bakemano Charge, guessing that's how you say it. Attacks all enemies, has a 40 or 60% chance of placing a stun debuff for one turn on a 3-turn cooldown. So an AoE possible stun, not a bad thing, not the greatest ability. Once again, a somewhat lower chance on this, but you know, it is a chance. So there's that. And then on the A3 we have Frightful Warcry, places a 25% strengthen buff on all allies for 2 turns, also placing a shield buff for 2 turns on all allies with less than 50% HP. The shield buff is equal to 15% of the target's max HP on a 4-turn cooldown. So you're providing a decent amount for the most part with this ability, especially if you have lower targets on your team at the time. You're giving them a shield and that strengthen buff to receive that damage. But not the greatest ability, just because the strengthen is always a nice thing, don't get me wrong, but the shield buff having the requirement of having those allies at less than 50% HP is a little bit of a bummer on that part. And then on the passive we have Soulmonger, heals this champion by 50% of their max HP whenever an ally or an enemy dies. This could be really good, especially if you are, having that provoke actually trigger. So if you are taking a lot of damage, you happen to kill an enemy, or an enemy dies I should say, then you can kind of recover from it. So that is really a nice little touch and a really cool passive. And then the aura, increase ally resist in all battles by 40. Once again, ally resist, not the greatest thing for PvE content, even though it is seeing a little bit more use in Doom Tower. But yeah, so overall, not a bad champion, really cool looking like I said. Not exactly sure where I would use Burangiri. Obviously, faction crypts can do he can do very well there. I'd imagine once faction crypts comes out for Shadowkin, you have a little bit of control on the A1, a little bit more control on the A2, and then you have some support ability on the A3, and some survivability on the passive. So yeah. That is all the champions involved in the 10 times. So overall, what do I think about this 10 times? There are some crazy legendaries, right? So you have things like Sir Nick, if you have Void Shards available. You have people like Altan, and you have Valkyrie, if you're popping Ancients or Sacreds, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, so overall, the champions aren't bad depending on your resource situation. If you're going to be popping shards anyway for the Fragment Summon Event, then I definitely would recommend going after some of these. If you have the voids, Sir Nick is definitely a game, I wouldn't say an account changer, but could be a game changer in PvE content. But yeah, so let me know what you guys are going to be doing with these, with this 10 times, I should say. Are you going to be summoning? Are you going to be skipping? Are you going to be even going and doing the fragment event overall? In my opinion, Versolf the Grim wasn't, I don't know. To me, he's not hyped up as a legendary to me. He seems pretty low tier in my opinion, unfortunately. I never like to say things like that, but yeah, he's not very impressive in my book for at least what he was designed to do, right? So yeah, just let me know. Hope you guys liked the video. Hope you guys got some information out of this, and I will talk to you guys later. See ya.